This is KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, and this is Get the Funk Out. Standing by to join me is Casey Suchan and Tim Cawley, and we're going to talk about their film Makeshift, the groundbreaking new documentary on the advertising industry. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Tell me how this film came about. How did the two of you, did you already know each other or did you connect?
We did not know each other, but I knew September Club. I was a fan of their documentaries. I worked at an ad agency like 10 years prior, and they came and dropped. So back in the day, they dropped off DVDs.
Whoa.
And I had made a lot of the DVD documentaries that I was a fan of. And I'd always thought if there was a documentary project came up, I'll reach back out to these folks. And Barry introduced me to Casey, and that was how Hey Let's Go, which is my company, which is like on the advertising side of the equation, hooked up with September Club. And then there's a client in the mix, WP Engine.
Okay.
Based in Austin. They, for the simplest way to say is they host really big websites and help you create beautiful experiences online. And they are my client in an advertising capacity. And they said, what if we made something that wasn't an ad, something that kind of flexed our creative muscles because we want people to be creative on the internet? What if instead of saying that, we showed people we want to be known as a creative company? What if we made a film? And I said, I had made a film once before. That's a poster right there of a film called From Nothing Something, which I sold to the Orchard back in the day, before it was 1091. And they said, I think Tim can help us make a film. And I said, Tim can help you make a film, but Tim needs help helping you make that film. And I brought September Club in.
Love it. And let me just say that this is not Barry Polterman. This is Casey, even though on the screen on Zoom, it's going to come up as Barry. So tell me about your background, Casey.
Well, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've been working in this space since 2001. Started out some very interesting projects on Tupac Shakur and the history of MC battling, working with QD3, Quincy Jones III. Went on to do a movie called Rock the Bells about the Wu-Tang Clan coming together for their last performance in Airbnb. And recently did a project about the First Amendment called The Animal People, the First Amendment and activism in the internet space.
Great.
So when Tim approached us with this opportunity, it was my slate of films is very eclectic in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so an opportunity to dive into yet another space that I was an outsider in was really fascinating to me and sparked my curiosity right away. And the idea to look at this industry, and Doug Prey had done a wonderful movie about the advertising industry called Art and Copy, which talked about that moment when the copywriters started working together in the same room with the art director and what that did for the creative process within this industry. But here we are, many years after that, that moment happened, and the internet has happened, which completely turned the industry upside down. Definitely. So the opportunity to look at this moment and tell the story of how this industry at the forefront of creativity and trying to understand the consumer had to pivot and adjust and, in both like a business way to understand this new field of, the internet, but also to really push the bounds of creativity for what could be possible in this and how that changed the conversation. Suddenly there was a conversation with the customer. That's all brand new, and how that just changed the dynamic between brands and their customers was just a fascinating kind of place to start. And that's really like what the impetus for the movie was, like what happened and how do we tell that story?
I love the way the movie is laid out. I remember back in 92, 93, this IT guy that worked with my dad showing me the internet and like Netscape. And I was so fascinated. And he went to a website and I'm like, what's a website? He was showing me what was going on. It was that was the time, right? 92, 93.
Yep.
And I was so fascinated. I couldn't believe what he was showing me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite quotes in the movie is one of the gentlemen who did, I can't remember their names, Peter, I think it is, and he's over at Hamas. Do I have that right, Tim? And he's talking about how when he first, before advertising, he worked at like a Radio Shack, and somebody came in and said, "Can I buy the internet?" Like it was just this brand new period, and none of us knew what was coming next. And as we talked about the timeline of the film, we really did try to take you through like the early 90s. And then here's when YouTube happened, and how did that change things? And here's when the iPhone came out, and that was a game changer. And we tried to use music and graphics and everything to take you right back to that moment, because it's so easy to just think, oh, I've had this, like I've had the world in my pocket forever. No, this is still really new,
Sure.
So I'm glad you enjoyed that part of the film.
I did, because I was thinking back to all these things that were happening and how fast it was happening and the impact. And as I was watching the film, I was thinking, boy, students could be watching this in a college class. I mean, it seems like a great prerequisite for the foundation of what happened.
That has come up so many times, the educational part of it, in that the people, a company like mine would hire who are 22, 23, 24, they've never not had the internet.
Right. Yeah.
It's like a CNN history documentary.
Yeah, and like we didn't have enough time in a short hour and a half to tell all those great stories of these advertising campaigns that just embarked in a new space. Like we talk about Subservient Chicken, we talk about Rihanna's video, which sparked this whole like online community of people using video to show them learning her dance moves and that kind of stuff. So we talk about a really nice, robust handful of campaigns, but there were so many awesome campaigns that are on the cutting room floor, but it does start that conversation. And what I really appreciate about the film is that at the end, we're talking to the next generation, right? People like at Active Theory who are thinking about, as 5G becomes more and more pervasive in the world, what does that mean for pushing the boundaries of how we can interact with people? And I think what's also really cool about where a lot of the people we interviewed in the industry, where their brains are, is not just how can we interact and use these tools to talk to the customer, but how can we be useful and respectful of their space, right? Because at first, and that's a new evolution, this thing is still happening. So I think it would be great for people, young, creative people who want to get into this space to watch the film and have those conversations,
Right. So what's some of the feedback you've heard? I'm sure you've heard some great things about the film. Maybe we'll start with you, Tim.
Well, Janeane, you're probably one of a very short list of people outside of our bubble
Really?
who have seen it. We wanted it to. We had a screening in New York, but that was a complicated, because the people in the film are all competitive with each other. They all head up different agencies who've probably pitched against each other, lost employees to one another, lost pitches, business.
Yes.
So I think it was hard for them to see it as a movie. So you're the second person we've had an interview with.
Wow.
So I'm more interested to hear what you're like, a fresh brain to us.
Yes.
Because we've seen it only as our filmmaking team, the client team. Very hard for a client to process something like this and view it as a piece of entertainment the way a neutral party would versus a marketer. They did an amazing job of trying to be neutral, I think. But I'd be curious of your POV. Did we pull it off? Does it feel, we tried to scrub it of marketing vibe and just
I think so. I think it has many different avenues, educational. Also, I come from a voiceover background, so it's interesting to see the world of advertising and the different agencies. And it's so funny to put names to faces. I've heard of a lot of these ad agencies on the
Yeah.
copy as I'm auditioning for them and going, oh, I know that name. That's interesting to hear their backstory into this world of advertising and how things have evolved. I mean, so I kind of saw it with different lenses.
That's kind of, I love that this is really the first time it's gotten out of our bubble. It was up on WP Engine's website, not their website, but they built a site for it to kind of like have it for the hardcore faithful, like the real tech insider developer community to get some feedback. But then they took it down because they said, we want this to be like a real movie. We want it to be nationally distributed and not feel like an ad. So they tested the waters, and now this is really it making its way into the world in 2 weeks.
And I think that's why they wanted to bring, make sure Tim, with his background in filmmaking himself and bringing us into the mix, because I always viewed this, and I know Tim did too, as, both a celebration of the creativity that advertising is capable of, and those boundaries that get pushed in that world.
Right.
And also like a historical document of this moment, and then something that would tease the question of what's coming next. I mean, this is a story that's still evolving. We hardly, cover the next generation. So I think it should hopefully stand the test of time 20 years from now. Like, that's something that we thought about often. Like, how do we make a film about this industry that really does stand the test of time and is something that people can look back on and go, oh, this is what happened, when the internet changed everything in this one particular industry.
Well, and thank goodness for the internet, because here we are in a pandemic and commercials are being produced with talent sometimes at home or wherever. And it's, we're submitting our auditions and emailing them in or whatever. But thank goodness for this evolution of technology and creativity.
Well,
Absolutely.
I think that's one thing, is that documentaries are about the subject, but also beyond the subject, in that, like one of my favorite recent documentaries was The Big Little Farm. I know nothing. I hate being outdoors, and I know nothing about farming. And I was fascinated because it's not really about farming. It's about they need to overcome these types of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this film is like an industry saw an existential change. Some people ignored it. Some people took it head on and said, with creativity and belief in myself, I can navigate it and find new ways. And we released it, we kind of finished it the week before the economy shut down.
Yeah.
And like the last existential threat was moving from TV to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And then boom, we release it right into a time when agencies are laying off everybody and all these small shoot-offs and permutations are happening. And what I'm hoping is, yes, it's a movie about how the internet changed advertising, but really the higher purpose is how belief and ingenuity can help you survive in business and hopefully in life, if you do the right things and just keep an open mind.
That's what I got from it, that it is a story of resilience. You need
Yes.
to, in order to move forward, you got to look back. You got to see where we came from, how it all started. But it's a story of resilience and creativity, and to keep going and where all these ideas come from, and to also listen to the needs of your target audience. Like, I loved what there was a millennial, she looked like she was in her 20s. She says, I don't like, or maybe it was the guy next to her, I don't like when they think they're selling to us, they know the language, it's like,
Oh yeah, the kid
flag.
the boss. Yeah.
Right?
They're great. And they say, stay out of my friend circle, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's like kind of the question that people in this industry are up against. How can we use all this information we have about our consumers and
Right.
and give them something that's useful. Like when there's a sale, I want to know there's a sale. I don't need my inbox gummed up with stuff or my feeds gummed up with stuff all the time. I
Right.
think there's this, how do we balance all this information that we have, be useful but not be invasive,
Yes.
right? And I think those two young people speak to that really briefly but incredibly eloquently.
Yes.
From Havas. Yeah, they're wonderful.
Yes. What else would you like people to know about this film?
I kind of, the thing that strikes me is sort of the meta nature of it,
Mm.
in that it's atypical in that a feature film is financed by a client, but it's not an ad for the client. Nobody from the client is interviewed. They're not trying to sell you anything in the movie, but what they're trying to do is, instead of gumming up your feed or trying to persuade you with hard sell, they have marketing, like any other big company. But what they did, they put their money where their mouth was and said, what if we make a legit feature film and go through, there's like a 2-year project. No client like signing on for that. Clients, that's a gutsy thing to do.
Sure is.
But they said, what if we made something people legitimately wanted to see without sell, and just got some brownie points for it at some point
Hmm.
along the line?
Yes.
Which very few clients, the movie starts off, a client would never think like that. It was like, we have a cookie now with 10% more fudge, buy it.
Yeah.
Laundry detergent with 10% more stain fighting agents, buy it. And like, that doesn't fly anymore. And they not only said, well, how do we navigate around it? They said, let's lean into it and really put our money where our mouth is, and be what the movie is championing.
Yes. Which is great inspiration right now for people that have lost their jobs, that there's another side to this, that people are looking for something to pivot to, and they need some creativity. So I think by watching this, there's some inspiration to be had.
That's what we were going for. And, Casey has this body of work that I was championing Rock the Bells, which is a music movie, but also, to me, one of the scariest music movies I've seen when the riot is pending. I was edge of the seat stuff. The Animal People haunts me, like legit haunts me. But to bring her in and say, we're going to make a movie, I want it to be startling in its tone of celebration. And that's the beauty of Casey. She's just like, she can shift gears and be genuinely curious when the subject matter is something that's just more like, it's not cool to make a very positive documentary.
Well,
You know it. You know it.
Well, what was cool about it was, of course, jumping into this world that I knew very little about was fascinating, and meeting all these people, these creative people who were trying to reinvent something. As someone who likes to think of myself as creative, like those the kinds of conversations we were having about, why are you doing this? Why is this important? What matters to you were really interesting. Not all of those conversations made the final cut. But one of my favorite moments in the movie is when we're talking to Alex Bogusky from CPB, and talking about the intangibility of the things that you create as an advertiser. And this is something, Tim, that we talked about. This is your world, right? Like you make something, and then it has its moment, and then where are you left as an artist? So it was a fascinating conversations we were having with people.
And I think there was a little bit of a good cop, bad cop isn't totally the right analogy, but I knew the backstories of, like, I didn't know everybody personally, but
Yeah.
I knew them or their company or their reputation. Whereas Casey could go in and lean in and be kind of a little bit more wide-eyed. Whereas I would, in between moments, I'd be like, now, Casey, when you're telling that guy about this other interview you did, remember that guy probably hates that guy because they just lost this account to so-and-so, and some of the answers might be colored. So I had sort of a little bit of inside knowledge, and I had the insider workings of the industry. So she could see it wide-eyed and I could see it practical. And I think those two viewpoints interlocked well to create an investigative sense, but also like an insider sense.
Yeah. It reminded me a lot. It was a wonderful collaboration. It reminded me a lot of working on the Tupac film that we did, Thug Angel, and the Beef movies on the history of the battle, because we were working with QD3, who is an incredibly talented producer in the hip hop world, worked with all these people, had this very inside knowledge. But as we were making those films, we wanted to make sure that they appealed to an audience who knew nothing about this world, that this world would be interesting and relevant to them, because there's a lot you can learn from worlds that are outside of something that you know a lot about. And I think that's true too of this movie. I think this movie, both, there's enough in there that everybody who lived through that time period, from the early 90s to present day, recognizes as cataclysmal shifts in their own personal lives and their own personal relationships with technology, and advertising is such a personal thing too, because it's all over our life. I remember that commercial. I remember that moment. So there's enough in there that we recognize our own lives in there, right? But seeing it from getting this little bit of an inside glimpse into it, just, I think, is such a learning process and really makes you think about the industry differently and your place as a consumer differently.
Yes.
Because it's very different now. And we have, as consumers, a lot more power. And I think the people who are going to be successful in the next, generation, iteration of the advertising industry are the ones who are going to continue to recognize that power that consumers have and deliver on, things that are going to be to enhance that relationship, to respect that relationship, and to be useful is the word that kept coming up again and again.
Casey, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, you're actually a tremendous role model for people that, especially the younger generation, who perhaps they don't have a solid background in advertising, but they have that mindset. They have the ability to think outside the box and to go for it. If you want to work, and don't let it hinder you. If you don't have a strong background, go for it. If you got some connections, if you understand, the creative ways of media and technology, go for it.
Oh God. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think, yes, if young people, I think that the advertising industry needs a young, diverse group of people coming in there, women, people of color, people